How's it going, everybody? And welcome to the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic, where Hutch and I have a lot to discuss this Monday morning, March 11th. What a time! There's a three-way overlap of men's basketball, baseball, and spring football. And it's a kind of an exciting time, I think, in Fayetteville right now, given the baseball team's success and a new era in the football program. But that pesky little basketball team keeps bringing us down. We'll have it all covered for you here on Hoggin the Mic. Let's bring in Hutch now, play that rock music, and get this episode rolling. Hutch, how's it going? Are you pro daylight savings time? What's going on in your mind right now as we've lost an hour of sleep today, but the sun at least sets an hour later for, I guess, overall happiness vibes down there in the afternoon.
Well, as a father of two children, time changes suck. They need to just pick one and stick with it. Don't ask me which, do they need to stick with this, whatever. I don't know. I just know we need to quit with the time change because as tough as it is on you and me, it's even tougher on a 4-year-old and a 7, almost 8-month-old.
Yeah, it's not my job to figure out what the right answer is, but this is definitely not the right answer. The time change. Come on, guys. It's 2024. We're smarter than this. This sucks. That's the only way to put it for me as a guy who's not really a morning person. But here we are recording these podcasts at 8 a.m. every day, every Monday. So let's dive in. I think, Hutch, let's start on the gridiron, or for that matter, inside the Smith Center practice facility, where Arkansas conducted 3 spring practices this week. The media got to watch 2 of them. They went on Sunday, and it was a closed practice session. We got to see Bobby Petrino return to Arkansas as the offensive coordinator. We got to see what his offense kind of looked like. We got to see Talon Green, the transfer quarterback from Boise State. Hutch, let's start broadly. Just what's your biggest takeaway from the first 2 spring practices? Is there anything that really surprised you, or maybe is going to be kind of the thought that you keep coming back to now as we get more access to spring practice and continue to monitor and assess this team?
I don't know if it's necessarily a surprise to me, but it's nice to see through the first, as you said, we saw the first 2 practices. And even though they were in shorts and, didn't even have shoulder pads on, they were just wearing helmets, it looks like Bobby Petrino is already making an impact on the offense in terms of just the overall creativity. We've seen we saw like a reverse on one team period. We saw a really nice run play where the offensive line blocked one way, the running back made one cut, went the opposite way, and it was a nice long gain. And they're not even tackling right now. Like if once you touch the running back, like he's down, and he didn't get touched for a while. So those are the runs that we never saw last year with Kendall Briles' offense. Kendall Briles, good Lord, Dan Enos' offense. Everything pretty much got stuffed at the line of scrimmage. There just wasn't really anything happening. Which, looking back on it, that should have been a sign, like a red flag. Like, hey, this may not go well. And sure enough, in the regular season, not really anywhere for the running backs to run. I don't think that's going to be the problem this year. I think they're going to have a good scheme. Bobby Petrino is an offensive genius, and I think we're already kind of starting to see that through these first couple of practices.
Yeah, I'll echo that. This past fall was the first time I got to consistently watch any college football practice on a day-to-day basis, and man, I just thought the struggles of the offense was normal. Like, of course, on practice, the inside zone drill's not going to amount to anything. The defense knows what's coming. They know the run's coming up the middle. Of course, the fastball, that little fastball drill that they do is not going to be that explosive. It's the defense knows what's coming. It's, relative and all that. But it didn't appear like that the first 2 days of practice. And of course, the negative Arkansas fan can maybe say, well, that's a concern for our defense if it's struggling already. And a lot of times in, these spring practices, the defense is supposed to have maybe a little bit of an upper hand. But I wouldn't be too concerned with that. I just think the offense looks more fluid. There looks to be more openings. Guys aren't clogging up the same spaces. The offensive line looks better. I think that's my biggest takeaway. And of course, That's an assumption from me in a lot of ways because we need to see these guys with full pads on. But just looking at the attitudes of Carmona and Nichols, I mean, they seem like guys that are ready to be leaders and ready to prove themselves on the SEC level. Josh Braun is massive and is slots back in at that right guard at that right guard slot. I think we've seen them have success on these practice style running plays that we just didn't see last year, and that was kind of eye opening for me. I really love the emotion that we've seen from especially Addison Nichols. I mean, every time they bust out a big run, it seems like he's the main guy getting everyone fired up. And Landon Jackson kind of spoke to that, or Andrew Armstrong, one of the players that we got to interview, quote unquote, in a press conference recently, said that he could tell that the offensive line is trying to gel and be a more cohesive unit, both on and off the field this year. And that's a great thing to hear because that unit is the biggest concern, I think, headed into fall, along with the linebackers. And to hear that they're making a big-time effort to improve the overall vibes of that group is really good to hear. Hutch, Taylon Green, he's taken the number 1 reps at quarterback in each of the 2 practices that we attended. Certainly feels like he's the starter. All the word coming into camp and so far into camp is that it's a competition. And Pittman is he said he was going to evaluate the quarterbacks a lot after Friday and see who maybe deserves more reps with the number 1 other than Green. This just feels over, doesn't it? Like, it feels like the quarterback competition really never got started, and this is kind of Taylon Green's job, which isn't a bad thing, but it would have been fun to maybe see a little bit more competition. How do you assess where things stand at quarterback?
Hey, well, Sam Pittman told us it was going to be a 5-man competition. Austin Ledbetter had just as much of an opportunity as Taylon Green, so I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah, it has been a little bit of a surprise that it has been completely Taylon Green. I really did think there was going to be at least some semblance of a competition where there was rotation and everything, but really, I mean, it almost seems like the depth chart is set. I mean, you got Taylon Green with the 1s, and you had Malachi Singleton with the 2s, and then Jacoby Criswell with the 3s, which was, again, a little bit of a surprise because you thought Criswell was going to be the guy that really pushes for that starting job. So I guess they've done enough to where, they felt confident enough that he was going to be the guy. Maybe one of my biggest concerns about him was just how he was going to come in and mesh with the team. And it seems like he's really taken on that leadership role. There was one, they were doing some one-on-ones with wide receivers versus DBs in, I think it was Friday's practice, the second practice, and Andrew Armstrong got open on a go route down the sideline, and Taylon Green just sailed it, threw it right over his head. No chance to catch it, and so it's a bad throw. But Taylon Green ran all the way down the field over to the sideline and was like talking to him and dabbing him up and being like, I guess saying like, hey man, that's my bad. You don't usually see that. The quarterbacks usually kind of stay there in the middle of the field where they're throwing the passes. But he literally, took it upon himself to go over there. It seems little, but to me that spoke volumes of just the leadership that he has. So that to me was a really big, positive thing to see from Taylon Green. So does seem like it's over. We'll see kind of how it looks, this week. They got 2 more practices on Tuesday and Thursday before going to spring break. If Taylon Green is still taking all the number 1 snaps after, as you said, Sam Pittman watched the film, then we could settle it. There's no more competition.
Yeah, I told you this, Hutch, and a couple others, but I didn't want to put it out there into the public right before spring. I talked to Landon Jackson for an interview for a story on why he decided to return. And, I didn't really ask him about Taylon Green, but he unprompted offered a nugget that he stepped on campus and was right away a leader of the entire team. I think he described him as an alpha, just in his presence. That screams QB1 to me. And I think we've seen that kind of carry over to practice. And as far as Malachi goes at the number 2 and Criswell at the number 3, I think, which quarterback has the higher ceiling of those 2? Those 2 specifically. And I think the answer has got to be Malachi. I mean, Jacoby has had, he's backed up some great quarterbacks, Drake May, KJ Jefferson. There was another one at Carolina that he
Sam
backed up.
Howell.
Sam Howell, another NFL draft pick at Carolina. So it's not like he's losing these jobs to bad quarterbacks, but he's been a perennial backup. And if he had a high ceiling as a SEC starter, he probably would have risen to that job by this point in his career. And I think Jacoby is one of the better backups that you'll have in the SEC. And shoot, if he's a third string, that's probably a good endorsement for what Malachi Singleton's been doing every day on the practice field. I don't think that battle's over at all quite yet. I could see Jacoby kind of, maybe they want to see what Malachi does against the number 2 defense, and they saw it all year last year with Jacoby. They know what they have in him. But certainly interesting to see. I think KJ Jackson is taking just as many reps with the first team as Jacoby Criswell, which is not very many, but it's notable that the true freshman and the redshirt senior are kind of on the same playing field in this competition right now. What I want to say too about Talon is I think the spring game, the scrimmages are really going to be the only way he loses this job, because his thing coming into Arkansas was he was a little susceptible to turnovers. We're not going to see those necessarily pop in a practice setting, where it's drills and stuff. If he gets into a scrimmage and, starts coughing up the ball, then maybe you see that opening for either of those guys. And I would be shocked if Sam makes any announcement until we have at least one scrimmage. But I mean, he did kind of like, would you be completely stunned if we came back from practice on Tuesday or Thursday of this week after Sam has watched some of the film and he names Talon the starter, that he's won the job? I mean, I don't think that it's that would be that big of a surprise. And I think it might be a smart thing to hey, let's get this over with and hand the keys over to the guy that's going to be driving the car all year in a very important season for Coach Pittman.
That wouldn't surprise me, just because it does seem like he's got such a large lead in that competition. But the other thing you got to consider is that there is a transfer portal window at the end of April where, if you name a starter, come out and say, this is our guy for sure. Then does Malachi Singleton, does Jacoby Criswell, do they enter the transfer portal? It's something you got to consider. Criswell, at least he's an Arkansas kid. He seems to really want to be here at Arkansas. And, maybe at this point, if he doesn't win the starting job, he realizes, hey, maybe I am a career backup, like you were saying. And there's worse, jobs to have than backup quarterback in the SEC. With him, if he never plays as the full-time starter, then fans will always remember him fondly. Like, man, if only Coach Pittman had put in Jacoby Criswell, he would have been the savior. And he doesn't have to play and prove them wrong. So that's something to consider, as well as, what do those guys try to enter the transfer portal? They both seem like they're happy here, but again, the quarterback position, you just never know. So that's the only thing I could see holding Sam Pittman back from coming out and naming the starter. Although I think I saw where he wants to name the starter by the end of spring at anyways. And spring games on April 13th, and then I think the spring transfer portal window opens on the 15th. So maybe that happens anyway. So if you're going to name it at the end of spring and you already have it in the middle of spring, maybe come out, why not? Why wait and go ahead and get it out of the way?
Yeah, and the bottom line, I think, with the transfer portal at quarterback especially is unless it's really, really, really close between your number 1 and your number 2, I mean, if the number 2 guy transfers and there's a big difference, your season's kind of over if there's an injury, regardless, of whether that guy stays or that guy goes. So I think, and there's so much emphasis on this season, getting it right for Coach Pittman. I think that might motivate him to end the competition a little earlier than we all kind of envisioned. Real quick, let's vomit up some nuggets here for the listeners, Hutch. If you have any, I've got 3 just real quick that I want to say, maybe my 3 key takeaways from what I've seen from spring football, and then you can, I know I didn't tell you about this or put it in a script or anything. So if you don't have 3, that's fine. I'll go first so you can think. One is the 2 freshmen, CJ Brown and Braylon Russell. I think they look the part of college players. And a lot of times I think we can get ahead of ourselves with freshmen, and maybe I'm doing that right now. But I think those guys have a serious chance to compete for snaps right away. And it's a great thing that they're here for spring football. Two, one guy that I didn't really realize we kept hearing his name until I went back and started reading some of the press conferences is Nico Davier. I think Anton Junkaj, the highly rated transfer from Albany, everyone kind of imagined him slotting in as that opposite defensive end on the other side of Landon Jackson. Nico is making coaches and players take notice. I think there's a chance he has a monster year this year. And then finally, just God, it's so good to see Luke Haas healthy and what that's going to mean for this team. His return to the offense, and he was really poised for a monster freshman year last year, especially coming off that LSU game in Baton Rouge. Really big bummer about the injury, but good to see him back. Hutch, do you have any few 2-3 nuggets of what you've seen from spring that you think are worth sharing?
Yeah, so I'll start with at wide receiver. So we all know what Andrew Armstrong can do, and it looks like he's having a good start to spring as well. But there's another guy that has kind of emerged in Tyrone Broden. We didn't really get to see him a whole lot last year. I mean, it's hard to miss him. He's 6'7". He's got great speed. They just really never found a way to utilize him, but he looks like he's emerged as maybe a go-to guy for Taylor Green. He's made some really nice catches. They seem to have good chemistry. There was one play, I believe, on the first day where Taylor Green hit him in stride down the sideline for a long touchdown. He threw the ball 35 yards down the field. So I really like what I've seen from Taylor Green. I think he could be, or from Tyrone Broden. I think he is having a really could be a breakout candidate. Then I'll go to the other side of the ball. I really like what I've seen from the two freshman defensive ends, Charlie Collins and Kavion Henderson. There was a 2-minute drill at the end of the first practice. And again, they're going up against the third-team offensive line. I think Kavion Henderson was going up against a walk-on right tackle. And, I mean, he just whooped them. I mean, that poor tackle, had absolutely no chance. Had a near sack and then an actual sack. And by sack, I mean they blew the play dead. And then on the last play of the 2-minute drill, both he and Collins got back there, and it was a dead play from the beginning. So really like what they've shown in a pass rush setting. So I like that. And then I'll say, maybe not for a starting position, but Varkey's Gums is a guy that last fall he showed up, and we're expecting like this guy to be like a big time playmaker. I mean, he was a highly touted transfer from North Texas, and he was just kind of out there. He never really did anything. I literally don't remember a single play he made last fall camp. But through 2 days, he's caught a ton of passes. The guy's getting open. He's catching everything. Nothing like super spectacular. Nothing that's going to go like on a highlight reel or anything. But he's just out there consistently making catches. And I mean, we know what Luke Haas can do. He's going to be your starter. Ty Washington's a guy that we feel really good about. He's not healthy yet, so he hasn't been practicing. But Varkey Gums looks like he's going to force his way on the field if he keeps making plays like he has been the first couple of days of spring ball.
Yeah, you're 100% right about Varkey's. And Sam talked about that a little bit in his press conference of how, hey, in this new era of the transfer portal in college football, it still can have an impact when guys stay for a multi-year run at a school, and he's starting to see the benefits of that with a guy like Gums. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get too hyped about this, these football practices and what we've seen, because it's everything that we've said could be ruined if the offensive line is not, exceedingly better than it was last year. But I do think, from what I can tell from this first part of spring, especially compared to the fall last year, because I wasn't here for the spring, there are just some better overall vibes, and some better, I think Petrino's is making a difference on the offensive sideline. And it's good to see Sam Pittman heavily involved with the offensive line too. And he can maybe focus on some other things, with an offensive coordinator that he has full trust in. I mean, at the end of the year last year, he said he had to be part play caller and part schemer, with Coach Kenny Guyton, helping him in his first time as an offensive coordinator. He doesn't have that responsibility anymore. He can focus on some of the other things. So I think we'll wrap up spring football talk there and move on to the number one team in the country, according to a few polls that have been released this morning, the Arkansas Razorbacks baseball team. Of course, I work for USA Today, so I will be continuing to refer to them as whatever ranking the USA Today coaches poll is given, which should come out later this Monday. Stay tuned if that's a number one ranking there. But 4-0 week for Arkansas baseball. Again, they've won 9 straight games. I really didn't think they played well this series, except for, they had a few, like 3 or 4 big innings. And hey, that makes all the difference. Those 3 or 4 big innings Arkansas has not had in past weeks. The lineup, I've been saying it, Hutch, so this is going to be a humble brag, but that lineup needed Peyton Stovall to come back. And once he came back, it made everyone's life a little easier. It pushed guys down. It put Kendall Diggs in a more run, a driving in run spot instead of being the guy to score runs. I don't think it's all the return of Peyton Stovall, but I think he's going to make a huge difference down the stretch. Just how critical was, how now that he's back, how much do you feel his return was necessary for this Arkansas offense to get rolling?
I think it's huge. I mean, this is a guy that, Dave Van Horn has told us, like, hey, this is a guy that's going to help a lot. And I was a little bit skeptical, like, how much can one guy really help? And again, it's McNeese State, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. But it seems like he helped a lot. I mean, they did win the first game 3-1, but McNeese probably threw its 2 best pitchers that game. But then they won the next 2 by run rule. I mean, they looked really, really good offensively halfway through game 2 and then in game 3. It seemed like they flipped a switch and they did, they did what we thought they were going to be able to do with this lineup. So there's still some guys, some moving parts and everything. They still got to figure out what they're going to do with Ross Lovich. Where's he going to start? Is Jason Jones going to get in the starting lineup? Things like that. They got to figure out what they're going to do on the infield because, with Stovall coming back, where do you put Peyton Holt? Because also Nolan Souza is also playing well. And you can't take Sprague Lott out of the lineup like he was going to be at the beginning of the year because he's leading the team in batting average. So it's a good problem to have. There are pieces, and now it's just a matter of, okay, how's Dave Van Horn going to make all this work? But it just feels like because you have Peyton Stovall back, it feels like you've got so much more and better options, even though it's just one guy.
Yeah, I think that he gives Van Horn a lot of decisions to make. I think he's been hitting second, and he was projected to be the leadoff hitter before the season. I kind of like him hitting second. I'm not going to lie. The only problem with that, though, is you've gotten some inconsistency from the guys that you've selected to hit leadoff. But maybe that's worth the risk. Hey, if you get like yesterday, for example, he put Ross Lovich at the leadoff spot. Ross had a terrific day, and look at what it did. Maybe you roll the dice that, hey, maybe if we just get that good day from the leadoff hitter, it's going to make the rest of our lineup have a great day. Not so humble brag. I think it was the 3rd inning of the Arkansas opening game against Friday. I looked over to someone and said, I think it might be time to panic about Vahiva Aloy. And then he pretty much went from that point out in the series and was Arkansas's best hitter on the weekend. 4 for 10, 6 RBIs, I think, 1 home run. Hey, he's starting to turn it on a little bit again. Huge asterisk with everything we're saying because it was McNeese State. And I think out of all 3 of the teams that Arkansas has faced in a home series, that McNeese is probably the weakest one. Maybe not right now in the RPI or their record, but I think at the end of the year that'll bear out. But Vahiva's gotten rolling. So Hutch, I think you kind of mentioned it there that when we've spoken, you've kind of said that by the time SEC rolls around, Dave will have a lineup that he trusts. I think that hasn't come to fruition just yet, and not in a negative way. I think because guys have maybe surprised him, like a Jared Sprague-Lott and a Nolan Souza specifically. So Hutch, let's talk about those position battles for a little bit. Who do you think should be the left fielder, and who do you think is the infield for Arkansas, when we get to this SEC play this weekend?
Boy, that's tough. boy, let's start with the infield. I mean, Peyton Stovall is going to be your second baseman. I think that's pretty much set. Ben McLaughlin has definitely been your first baseman. He's been excellent defensively. I mean, he's had 4 hits the other day, gets a lot of praise for his bat because he's hitting like 364 or something like that. But what he's done defensively at first base, I think it's overshadowed. He's been fantastic. So there's your right side of your infield. Aloy's going to be your shortstop just because he's your guy. He's the guy that's starting to turn the corner. You mentioned he had a really good weekend, but he's also had some like really near misses. I mean, he had like a 109-mile-an-hour line drive caught in left field yesterday. Then he had an RBI single off the top of the wall that was nearly a home run. I think he had a ball caught at the wall in the midweek game. And then he also had the ball that he smoked in the previous series against Murray State that if the wind wasn't blowing like it was, probably would have been a home run as well. So he's making better contact of late. So I think he's solidly there as your shortstop. And then it just comes down to what you're going to do at third base. And I think it's between Jared Spraglott and Peyton Holt. Spraglott has been very, very good so far. I'm anxious to see how he handles things at SEC play. He hasn't hit the ball as well lately. You know, he got off to such a hot start. It's probably hard to sustain that. But I could see Peyton Holt, still being a factor there. We know what Peyton Holt could do. I mean, he hit I think he dang near hit 400 in SEC play last year. So he's a guy that he can hit SEC pitching. He's also a guy that's kind of like a spark plug. I think that's how Dave Van Horn has described him in the past. So that's I think that's your battle. And then poor Nolan Souza. I mean, all he's done is hit like 400. And he's a guy that's a really promising freshman. I see him being more of a, pinch hit, start here and there kind of guy, get him some play, experience. But I think Dave's going to eventually go with the older guys, whether that be Spraglott, Holt, Stovall, whoever.
I think in the infield, I agree. It's the first base, second base, shortstop are locked up with the 3 guys that you said. I think Spraglott deservedly gets the nod at third base for now. He's leading the team in average. He's leading the team in on base percentage. He's got 10 walks. He's third on the team in slugging. And he's going to hit at the, now with the return of Stovall and Diggs, McLaughlin, and Aloy all hitting well, he's going to hit a little further down in the lineup. I like having that power option down there. But I agree with you. I think the leash is going to be very short for Spraglott in SEC play. I think Peyton Holt's going to be a guy that is going to play a lot of third. And I think, look, Stovall's still recovering from his foot. Maybe Peyton Holt is the guy that plays, gives him some time, once a weekend out of the field, and he plays second base. Nolan Souza, though, I don't know if Dave does this, but I think he deserves to be in the lineup as the designated hitter right now. I think he's been terrific. He's been walking, which is something that I think Dave's been impressed with, is the freshman's patience at the plate. He's shown he's got power. I mean, he's also shown he can, hit line drive singles the opposite way. The guy has been arguably Arkansas's most impressive hitter over the last 2 weekends. And I think he deserved, it would be kind of weird to see a guy hitting like that get taken out of the lineup. And I think the catchers have just not lived up to their expectations this year. I think a lot of us said 4 catchers, 2 of them, when Arkansas is at their best, 2 of them are going to be in the lineup, 1 at catcher, 1 at DH. And right now, I don't think any of those catchers deserve to be the designated hitter. So it probably comes down to either one of those infielders or one of those left fielders, Lovich / Jason Jones. And right now, I would probably give the nod to Souza or even Lovich. And when Jason Jones is playing left, you get Lovich at DH, or maybe you just stick Jason Jones at DH since Lovich is a better defensive fielder than Jason Jones is. Although that might not be the case, because it feels like every time Lovich plays center field, he gets pulled for Wilmsmeyer at the end of the game, or whoever's playing center field. That might be Edmondson I'm thinking of. Anyways, it's a lot of questions to kind of figure out. Fortunately, though, these are questions that are arising out of good play, I think, instead of struggles. It's a slight combination, the catchers and Jason Jones's batting average. But look, Jason Jones is one of the team leaders in RBIs, and he's got a couple home runs, and he's kind of doing his role at the plate of hitting for power. I'm kind of digging what we've seen from Jason Jones this year. He's going to have a few very, very uncompetitive at bats, but he's also going to bring the power and the run scoring, prowess from left field. So, do you have any? I don't think do you have any preferences at left field or in the outfield between those two? Do you think it's that's still an open competition, or one guy has the inside track?
I think it's still a competition right now. I didn't think I would ever say this, but I think Ross Lovich has earned some significant playing time. All he's done is produce. He's the guy that's played in the SEC before, had produced in the SEC. He's kind of having the year that I thought maybe Ty Wilmsmeyer might have, and he's maybe a guy that gets left out. He had a really nice, 2-run single, in a full count, 2 outs, that sparked Arkansas was kind of running away with it on Sunday, but it's been very inconsistent. He had that great day on opening weekend against James Madison, where he had a bajillion RBIs and robbed a home run. And I don't think there's any question that he's the best defensive option back there. So you're still going to see him in late games, no matter who it is playing in center, whether it be Edmondson or Lovich or whoever. But maybe he's the guy that gets left out. Lovich has some experience in center. I think he played some center field as a freshman at Missouri. But again, that was Missouri, so probably weren't very many options there. So yeah, it's interesting. Jason Jones does bring that power. He also is capable of going up there and striking out in 3 pitches, like you said, very uncompetitive. But boy, when he gets a hold of one and hits 110 miles an hour, boy, you like that, don't you? So I could see him, still playing some and maybe mixing it with DH, like as you said, with Nolan Souza, maybe Peyton Holt if he's not playing third base. So again, I think these are good problems to have. Maybe you wish your catchers were producing a little bit better than they were offensively. I still think Hudson White can turn it around and get going there. But yeah, it seems like they've got options. And again, I'm very anxious to see what they do this weekend against Missouri. SEC competition, borderline SEC competition. And we'll see how it goes then.
Yeah, it's I'm excited to see what they do at catcher. It just hasn't turned out the way I think. He's a freshman, so it's hard to. I don't want to be too hard on him. But Ryder Helfrich just hasn't lived up to the expectations this year. And he was given every opportunity. They go down to Arlington, and he's the guy starting at DH and then at catcher the first 2 nights against Oregon State and Oklahoma State. And I don't think he had a single hit in either of those games. And ever since then, it's been kind of spotty, his playing time. And when he does get in, he looks okay defensively, but still not really producing much at the plate. So pitching wise, the starters didn't look sharp this weekend. They got a little wild, all 3 of them. None of them lasted more than 4 innings. Hoggin definitely could have gone more. Coach Van Horn admitted that they were saving him, especially because it was 1 day of shorter rest before the Missouri game. I got bad news for Arkansas fans. There's another day of short rest next week because they play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, their second series of the SEC year. But I think the training wheels are going to come off for Hoggin. The pitch count will get close to 100 next week in the SEC. It's go time for the ace. And the bullpen, I think there's a pecking order starting to develop. I think you got Gabe Gackle, Cody Frank, and Will McIntyre, the 3 most trusted arms out there. Stone Hewlett is kind of the lefty specialist, and he's been good in limited action this year, and he'll continue to get, calls against lefties in tight spots. But I think those 3 guys have kind of separated themselves right now from the likes of Gage Wood, Jake Faraday, the other guys that are in the bullpen. Of course, it's open for, guys can slide in and out of who the preferred reliever arms are. And Dylan Carter made his return from Tommy John surgery. He's a guy that maybe could log some meaningful innings for Arkansas. But I do think those are the top 3. And once Hoggin starts pitching deeper into games, maybe you can save, sprinkle those arms out throughout the weekend instead of, for example, this weekend, McIntyre and Gackle both threw on Saturday in game one, and they basically were unavailable the rest of the series. If you can save one of those guys, or maybe just throw McIntyre and he can throw again on Sunday and Gackle can go. I don't know, kind of blabbering here, but I think Van Horn's got a lot of options. As soon as the starters start logging more innings, this pitching staff is going to become even better.
I agree. As they start kind of working deeper into games, you're going to have fewer innings to have to fill with that bullpen. And if you've got a guy like McIntyre who could throw 2 innings on Friday and then 2 more on Sunday, or have 5 total innings on the weekend, that's hugely valuable. I mean, Cody Frank is also a guy that could pitch twice, so he's a valuable arm. And then Gackle, he's proven that he could give you 2 or 3 really, really, really good innings at the back end of a game. So if you get those 3 guys plus the 3 starters, that pretty much eats up the innings, with maybe another guy sprinkled here or there. Hopefully, ideally you get up big in one of those games, especially against Missouri, and you can maybe throw somebody that you're not necessarily sure what you got. I mean, I still want to see kind of what Cooper Dossett can do. He's a guy I've seen a little bit of. We'll probably get to see him on Tuesday against Oral Roberts, I would imagine. Colin Fisher's a guy that's going to be your midweek starter, but maybe he gets to a point where he's starting on the midweek, but also gives you an inning on the weekend. It's kind of like his bullpen session. So I like what they've got. They've got plenty of pieces. I'm not 100% giving up on Jake Faraday yet. I still think he's got some potential there, but I don't think we're going to see him in a super high leverage spot, anytime soon. I think they're going to kind of let him earn his position back. But Gage Wood's another guy. He got rocked around a little bit early in his outing on Sunday, but he really settled in and looked good after that. So maybe he's a guy that has to start an inning fresh and not inherit a bases loaded situation. So yeah, they've got arms, and as you said, once the starters go deeper, they should be just fine.
I agree. I think, and Gage, inheriting the bases loaded is never easy. You just are immediately behind the 8 ball, and you pitch differently. There's a little more stress on each pitch, and it makes things more difficult. Less room for error. I'm not panicking yet on that guy. Faraday, I'm a little concerned about. It just hasn't, since he got the save in Arlington against Oregon State, it hasn't quite clicked like it did that night. And I think there's enough of like you said, 3 arms might be enough to get through the weekend out of the bullpen. Probably not. You probably need another guy, but for high leverage situations, 3 should be enough with these starters. So we'll see. It's time for those starters to eat more innings. It's time to see Hagan get to the 6. Same with Brady and Mason though, and I will say Mason Molina not very sharp this weekend. He's flirted with a lot of walks over the in times this season, and he's gotten away with it because of those strikeout numbers being so high. The strikeout numbers came down a little bit against McNeese State, but hey, 9 straight wins, number 1 in the country according to D1 Baseball America, and perfect game. We're nitpicking here. They're 13-2. It's a terrific start. And I say all that because now we're about to talk about the Arkansas basketball team, and what a opposite end of the spectrum feeling from those guys. Pretty good week, though. They beat LSU at home. They go to Alabama. They are leading the entire game, and they cough it away at the end, just as they have in any, meaningful road game where they've had a chance this year. I guess really just only the Kentucky game comes to mind, but they're going to be the 12th seed at the SEC tournament, opening with Vanderbilt. Hutch, how far do you think these guys can go? 2 wins? Just 1 win? What's your prediction for Arkansas basketball at the SEC tournament?
They are playing a lot better lately. I mean, even though it hasn't always resulted in wins, I think they could beat Vanderbilt. I mean, they almost beat Vanderbilt despite trying to lose the game, for like an 8-minute stretch in the second half. And plus Eric Mosa was really good at those revenge games. I think he's 12-4 in revenge games at Arkansas. So he's really good at those. So I think they could beat Vanderbilt. Then they got South Carolina after that. That's a winnable game. They got blown out by South Carolina at home, but I think Arkansas is playing much, much better. And I'm still, even though South Carolina's been one of the best stories of the season in the SEC, I'm still not 100% sold on them. So, I mean, maybe they could win that game, but then I don't know if they could really do much more after that. I think they got Auburn after that. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's tough. Auburn is really, really good. That's if they could get by the first two nights, then you're playing your third straight game against a team that's fresh. That's probably where the road ends. And you know what? If that happens, you finish 500. Considering where it looked like the season was going at the beginning of SEC play, 500 wouldn't be the absolute worst thing in the world. There's no postseason play. They're not going to make the NIT, even if they make it to the SEC championship game. I don't think. And then they have to win 5 games in 5 days to make the NCAA tournament, which never happened, and I don't expect it to happen this year.
No, I don't either. I did, my the editor wanted an SEC prediction story from all of the SEC beat writers with USA Today, just saying how far they'll go. I said 2 wins, and maybe I think that it felt optimistic that they would get 2 wins, because I think there's a very real scenario where they don't get a single win. One thing that we've seen from this team over the course of the season is it's been weird. They haven't played well down the stretch of games after looking good, really good against Purdue. In a tight game. Obviously an exhibition that has no meaning whatsoever. But I think we kind of saw them show some late game execution there. They did the same against Duke. Like earlier on in this season, we thought maybe there was going to be this, a closer with Tremont Mark, but they haven't closed games really well in the SEC all year. If it's tight against Vanderbilt, I could see it being a one and done scenario. But man, that would be really disappointing. I think I think they need to win 1 game in the SEC tournament for no real reason whatsoever, other than to just not be a disappointment. And that's really what the season's come down to at this point. It's unless they go win 5 games in 5 days, they're playing for pride. And I think that's all the basketball talk we really need to give out on this week's show. And we might have a lot more to discuss next week if the off season officially begins, whenever they lose in the SEC tournament. And if they go win 5 games in 5 days, we'll have the miracles in an NCAA tournament bid to discuss. So we'll see what narrative we have to talk about on Monday. Hutch, just real quick before we go, do you think that we talked about the Eric Musselman leaving stuff in an episode a lot earlier this season? Have you changed your mind at all about? I think when we talked about it, we both said Arkansas would, really should want him to come back. Yeah, he's been, everything that this university's asked for. We both, kind of said we wouldn't be surprised if he left, though, because, it's been a short tenure everywhere he's gone. Has anything changed in your mind? And the answer might be no, and that might be a wrap to this pod. But I think it's just worth mentioning. There's a lot of, Twitter can be the death of me sometimes, and there's a lot of smoke right now just with all the coaching searches. But Muss's name continues to come up when people talk about jobs like Louisville and UCLA. Has just anything changed with Eric Musselman and his future in your mind now that we've kind of reached the end point of the disappointing regular season?
No. I mean, I still think that it would surprise me if he left. It would be really unfortunate for Arkansas. I mean, we said, as you said, we said it back then that Arkansas should want him to stay. But now I think Arkansas fans should definitely want him to stay, because we've seen what he did this year. Yes, it was a terrible year. They stunk. They made some bad decisions out of the portal and everything. But Eric Musselman's not going to quit and give up on a team. They could have easily mailed it in and been like Missouri this year, where they go winless in SEC play, or even like Vanderbilt, where they get blown out every week. So they have played a lot better down the stretch, even if it hasn't always correlated to wins and losses. So to me, that tells you he's never going to quit, and he's going to keep fighting and try to figure out solutions. So you want him for sure, but does he want you? That's the question. Is there going to be a job that comes open that is one that he wants to jump at. And so that's what we got to wait and see. And, as more jobs officially come open, then we'll have to, hold our breath and wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. I think that for me, watching this end of the season close, I've, and this is my first year covering Muss. I'm kind of going to the point where I don't think it's going to come down to money, right? I think it's just a matter of like what Musselman wants. But if there was an opportunity for Arkansas to sell Muss more on being the head coach of the Razorbacks, with how they've closed this season, I think the Arkansas administration should pursue that avenue and don't go down without a fight. I think maybe before this close of the year, I might have been like, hey, they haven't been good for a couple regular seasons now. Maybe it's okay, a fresh start if they go get the right guy. From what I've seen recently, I think Musselman is the right guy. I mean, look, their best two players are an undersized scoring guard, Caliph Battle, and a guy, Tremont Mark, who before he came here was known for his defense at Houston. And those are their two best offensive players right now because Trevin Brazile and Devontae Davis just had very disappointing seasons. I guess you could throw Mekhi Mitchell in there, and that's another sign of growth and what Musselman's cobbling together. And he could have easily finished this year with wins at Kentucky and at Alabama if a couple things go their way. So I've been impressed with the close down the stretch, and hope he stays. We'll see. The off season for Arkansas basketball feels like it's a few days away. So on that note, we'll get out of here. I'm actually going to make my work meeting on time today. No interruptions for the podcast. Hutch, thank you so much for joining as always. I will see you Tuesday, and until then, let's keep cobbling up these number one rankings for the Arkansas baseball team. It's been a fun start to the spring. We'll see where it goes from here. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you next Monday.